I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 1 o'clock. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. Detectives are examining the possibility that the motion of the taxi stopping suddenly may have caused the improvised device to detonate prematurely. Police have also spoken to the brother of the bomber, Emad al-Swalemin. An investigation is underway following the deaths of 2 women and 2 children after a house fire in southeast London. Firefighters managed to pull all 4 people from the property in Bexley Heath, but they died at the scene. A man who got out before firefighters arrived was taken to hospital. The fire is not thought to be suspicious. The UK is banning Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move brings British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary Priti Patel says Hamas has significant terrorist capability that includes access to extensive and sophisticated weaponry and terrorist training facilities. Supporters of the Palestinian Islamist group could face up to 10 years in prison. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means people can visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a full national lockdown for at least 10 days from Monday. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try to contain a 4th wave of COVID cases. Students will have to go back to homeschooling, restaurants will close, and cultural events will be cancelled. British troops are being deployed to Poland's border with Belarus to help tackle the migrant crisis. 100 military engineers will provide practical support and work to reinforce the perimeter. Thousands of people have been gathering along the border in freezing temperatures over the last few weeks. The EU has accused Belarus of deliberately creating the crisis, which Minsk denies. A Croatian lorry driver has been jailed for 6 years for attempting to smuggle cocaine with a street value of £1.6 million into the UK. Predrag Gojic was stopped at Dover's Eastern Docks in May with 20 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside reels of paper. He told officers he planned to take the drugs to Leicester for a payment of €10,000. UK retail sales rose by 0.8% in October, boosted by early Christmas trading. It ends a 5-month run of falling or flat sales. The Office for National Statistics says second-hand items, toys and sports equipment sold particularly well.
Maybe some of that second-hand stores as people thinking a little more environmentally about their purchases. There was also solid sales for clothing and footwear. As people are starting to go out a little more, as the economy continues to open up further. In fact, it's interesting that UK footfall is the highest of any of the major EU economies and higher than the US, which is, a really refreshing figure to see at the moment.
From next autumn, schools in England will be required to help keep uniform costs down. They'll be instructed to remove unnecessary branded items under new Department for Education guidance. Schools will also have to make sure second-hand uniforms are available. You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And this is On the Money. As ministers back a new law forcing banks to refund victims of so-called APP fraud, we're asking why such a move is only happening now. Plus, each week On the Money features a Startup Britain interview with driven entrepreneurs, the people taking risks to bring their business ideas to life. Well, today, we're talking to Sian Gabidon, the British fashion designer and former Apprentice winner who's just launched a loungewear range for Asda. That's coming up shortly. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of today's discussion? It's your show too, so get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, there's plenty of economic doom and gloom around, so let's kick off this bumper 2-hour Friday edition of On the Money with some good news. because big banks who fail to tackle fraud will be named and shamed under government-backed plans to ensure that victims who transfer money to scammers are fully compensated. The banking watchdog, the payment systems regulator, wants banks to reimburse customers who've lost out and for such repayments to be compulsory. The Economic Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, says the government will, quotes, legislate to address any barriers to regulatory action at the earliest opportunity. Banks and building societies will also have to publish data on fraud prevention and reimbursement rates, and they could face fines if they don't treat victims fairly. So-called authorised push payments, or APP fraud, when victims are tricked into transferring money to a fraudster, have grown steadily over recent years. Back in 2017, such fraud amounted to just over £200 million a year, according to the industry trade body UK Finance, with banks reimbursing just a fraction of that. As APP fraud's grown over recent years to almost £500 million in 2020, compensation payments from banks have risen but are still well below half what victims have lost. During this COVID crisis, APP fraud has surged once again. It's up 71% during the first half of this year, with criminals stealing the equivalent of an astonishing £4 million a day. Until now, bank customers have faced a lottery when it comes to getting refunds, with different banks interpreting the rules in different ways. During one 3-month period last year, one unnamed bank, Y, issued refunds in just 1% of fraud cases. The Financial Ombudsman, which settles disputes between banks and customers, has ruled in favour of 3/4 of victims refused bank refunds, suggesting banks have been systematically avoiding making payouts to fully deserving and innocent customers. But now, in what the consumer group Which describes as a huge win for consumers, the Bank Fraud Compensation Scheme will change from the existing voluntary code introduced in 2019 to a mandatory scheme underpinned by law. Good news, but why is this only happening now? And that's your On the Money question today. APP bank fraud. Why has this law change taken so long? So, as regular On the Money viewers know, we have on this programme in-depth discussions with people who really know their stuff. We have Tony Neate, a former policeman and CEO of Get Safe Online. Also joining us, it's Joel Lewis, policymaker at Age UK. And in the studio, we have our On the Money regular personal finance expert, founder of moneymagpie.com. It's Jasmine Birtles. Good to see you, Jasmine. Joel, let's start with you. Age UK has been highlighting this problem for bank fraud for many, many years. It is unfortunately often older members of the community who are targeted. There's been a voluntary code for a while. How do you think that's worked?
It's worked very well, but it's not all banks that have done it. This is great news for anyone who's been a victim of fraud and anyone who uses banks, to be honest. But what we've all got to do is got to look and make sure the bank we're using is signed up to this voluntary code of practice. And a lot of people would have seen now there's something called COP, confirmation of payee. So when you pay a new person, their bank details, their name, their account number will come up as confirmed. But something that Get Safe Online has been pushing for a number of years now is don't make that big payment without checking. And first of all, pay £1. If you're paying anyone, you're a member of your family, you're paying a supplier, pay them £1, then check with them that they've received that £1. It's an easy, simple way of checking that you're going to send the money to the right place. These new payments, the system regulator who's bringing these new in, these are proposed, and we have until the 14th of January to make decisions about that. But I think it is a really good step forward. But in fairness, a lot of the banks have been making big inroads into stopping this sort of fraud taking place.
Joel, at Age UK, I'm sure this has been a big subject for you. We only had this voluntary code from 2019, and it's clear that quite a few banks aren't implementing it in the way it was meant to be implemented. As I said, in one 3-month period last year, one bank that remains unnamed, I don't know why it should be unnamed. It's mad that it's unnamed, but it's compensated just 1% of victims. So I guess you're pleased to see this move from a voluntary code to, we hope, a mandatory compensation system.
Of course, it's a great win for consumers. It's a good day for all of us out there. It's recognition that all of us can be a victim of scams, all of us be a victim of authorised push payment fraud. We were involved with the creation of the code when it first came in 2019, and we all went into that with the best of intentions. But unfortunately, the banks haven't been adhering to it in the way that they should have been. And now it's right that the government have taken it out of their responsibility. They're now going to force banks to require refunds for this type of horrible scam. And it obviously has a massive, devastating impact on hundreds of thousands of people every year. And unfortunately, the banks haven't been doing what they're supposed to be doing and refunding victims of these horrible crimes.
Jasmine, with the best will in the world, isn't a lesson from this, even somebody like me would recognise, I'm sort of pretty free market, pro-business kind of guy, I guess. But voluntary codes, they just don't work.
No.
Because banks will just game them.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. And we've seen it, as you've said, with all the figures that you've come up with. Yeah, they have basically gamed it. So I think this probably is, in a sense, the answer to your question. Why has it taken so long? Well, because the banks were given the opportunity to do it, to do it properly and do it on a voluntary basis. Didn't work, so now it's going to have to be enforced, essentially.
And do you think on moneymagpie.com, have you had cases of victims coming to you? I mean, it's about 50,000 victims or more a year.
It's
4 million quid a day in
Yeah.
the first half of this year. That's the numbers we can get hold of. It's actually quite hard to get hold of these numbers, not least because the banks aren't very forthcoming with them.
No, of course. And the thing about push payments is it's often huge amounts of money because, I mean, I'm just thinking about people who've contacted us. There was one where there's an actual business and their accounts person had an email telling them to apparently from the boss, telling them to pay into a particular account. You know, they lost 40 grand. Somebody else who paid, she thought her plumber, that was 2.5 grand. And the bank where the account was, she found the account, she found the bank, and the bank said, "Oh no, we can't do anything about it." Well, they know, KYC, know your customer. They know, they should know who that is. They should be able to access and stop that money going through to that person.
Tony Neate, let's go back to you. You are a former policeman. You're the CEO of Get Safe Online. We don't know when this law is going to come in. We heard from a Treasury Minister there in my opening statement that it will happen as soon as possible. But meanwhile, surely there are steps that people can take in order to stop these scams, because even if you think you may get repaid, it's still awful to be scammed in the first place.
Absolutely, and I'm not going to now, but I could name the banks that aren't signed up to this voluntary code. I can give you lists of people that have been victims of them.
Tony,
so what I would say is, first of all,
why can't you name the banks? Why are you scared of them? Name the banks.
Well, I don't think it's my position to advise people that, but I'm not going to name those banks now because I don't think it's.
I'm a professional journalist. I've spent all morning trying to find out these banks that aren't signed up to the voluntary code, because I cover many, many subjects. Can you tell me those banks that haven't signed up to the voluntary code?
I suppose I know one or two, but I don't know whether in the last days, weeks that they've now signed up to them. So but I'm more than happy to speak to you or speak to your editor and give you the list of those people. You can double check that the information I'm giving is right.
All right.
But I don't want to give false information. And that's being perfectly honest with you. And I don't want that to happen, but I'm more than happy to share that with you offline. But
Thank you,
can check. It's called the APP. It's called the contingent reimbursement model. Go online, find out if your bank is signed up to it. If it isn't, move banks. I've just moved banks because one of the security issues that come up now is you might get your card declined or your payment. I'm happy with that. What I wasn't happy with was that it took an hour and a half to get through to the bank to speak to them, at which time the shop had closed and that was the problem. So I'm ready to look at that. I'm more than happy to share that information with you once I've checked it out to make sure it's genuine. I don't want to falsely give the wrong banks, but that's something people can do. Check that out. Remember what I said at the very beginning. Pay that initial £1. if everything that we've just heard, if they'd all made an initial payment to the plumber of £1, spoken to the plumber and said, have you received my £1? I've just done it. I've done it. I do it every time I make a payment to anyone, including my daughter has just changed banks. I did it with her. Have you received my £1? Simple, easy. Because let me tell you, even if the law changes and you do get your money back, you go through a lot of heartache. You go through a lot of pain and suffering before that happens. Let's mitigate that by putting things in that we can do and going with the banks that mitigate it for us.
Joel, what do you think of the fact that it's taken us so long to get to this point? We all knew that this APP fraud was happening. I just showed their figures. It was more than 200 million quid back in 2017. It then took 2 years to get a voluntary code in place, and within 2 years, that voluntary code has crumbled. Surely the government should have gone in hard at the beginning with a law that if you get scammed, then your bank has to compensate you in cases where the victim is clearly innocent.
You're right, Liam. The Treasury Select Committee years ago said that this code should be mandatory and that there should be forced refunds for these type of victims, and which the consumer organisation 5 years ago raised a super complaint about this issue. And it just seems now that our government are only really getting to grips with the scale and increasing threat of fraud. It's been described now as a national security issue. It's a threat to, the UK as a centre of global finance. And so it's a shame that it's taken so long and so many victims have to wait so long. What's happening at the moment, like you say, 75% of cases are getting overturned. That means vulnerable victims that have lost tens of thousands of pounds are having to wait months and months to get the resolution from their bank that the bank know that they should pay out to them. And, that impact of not having that money, often these cases can't go to court because the evidence isn't there. It's really hard to go after these criminals as well. And so, the emotional impact, the impact on people's health, their confidence. We've also spoken to a lot of people about the impact on family relationships as well. It can really, drive families apart if, so your mum was to lose some money, your sister was to lose some money, your husband, your children, and that can have a really devastating impact, particularly when people are already vulnerable because they've lost money as a result of one of these crimes.
I'll tell you something else, Joel. There's also a lot of shame. I bet a lot of people get scammed and don't tell anyone because they're ashamed.
Yeah.
They feel as if they've been hoodwinked. They feel silly. So I bet the horrendous numbers we're reporting here today that finally ushered in a law change or the promise of a law change. I bet those numbers are themselves an underestimate. But hold that thought. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we will keep this important discussion going with Tony Neate, CEO of Get Safe Online, Joel Lewis of Age UK, and friend of the show in the studio, Jasmine Birtles. Keep your emails coming. Have you been scammed in the past? We'll only use your first name if you tell us about that if we read out your emails. What do you think of this law change? Do voluntary codes ever work when it's up to the banks to behave properly? Let us know. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. Stay with us. You're on the money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. Colder weather is on the way, but today at least stays very mild. Cloudy for most, and it stays wet in northern Scotland. The exception being Shetland, away from this weather front, but subject to some very strong winds at first today, those winds easing later, and then this weather front bringing that damp weather to northern Scotland. But elsewhere, closer to high pressure, we've still got this mild but rather cloudy westerly airflow. So a lot of cloud around, but the promise of some breaks in the clouds, some sunshine coming through eastern England into northern England later, Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland. And it's a mild day, especially where we get those cloud breaks, temperatures at 13, 14, perhaps even 15 or 16 Celsius there in Aberdeen. Not feeling quite so pleasant where we've got the rain in northern Scotland and staying blustery in Shetland. The rain continues through the evening and overnight in the far north, but further south we keep the cloud cover. Again, some cloud covering the hills and some spots of rain and drizzle around some western hills and coasts. But on the whole, a dry and relatively mild night, not quite as mild as the last few nights. And that wet weather still with us in the far north of Scotland as we begin Saturday. And it comes south, so a spell of rain for Scotland, Northern Ireland during the morning, before it then pushes into northern England, and it does clear during the afternoon from Scotland and Northern Ireland, with sunny spells and blustery showers replacing it. It stays cloudy, roasty dry, but with a few spots of rain here and there in the south, and 12 to 13 Celsius, a degree or so down compared to today. Here's that area of rain then, coming south on Saturday night. It fizzles out somewhat, so not much rain on it, but it does mark a significant change once we clear that cloud. Brighter skies arrive from the north, sunny spells on Sunday for many places, but some showers around coastal areas. It will also be colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back, you're on the money. Now, new laws will force banks to refund victims of so-called APP scam. That's authorised push payment. But today we're asking, why has this law change taken so long? We still have our guests with us, Tony Neat, former policeman, CEO of Get Safe Online, Joel Lewis of Age UK, which have been campaigning in this area, and Jasmine Birtles in the studio, she of moneymagpie.com. Jasmine, it's worth saying that this has only happened. I think we should congratulate a couple of newspapers here who've been pushing. Not only the Telegraph, which I write a weekly column for, but also the Mail. These two papers have really given a lot of space and investigated particular cases, lots of case studies of this awful fraud. But I know at moneymagpie.com you get lots of people emailing you for advice. There is shame out there, isn't there? There is concern. There will be some people, particularly if they're professional people, and you know they've moved 50 grand, 100 grand. These are sort of payments involved, often people's life savings, and they don't report it. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say really genuinely do not be ashamed, because these people are professionals. And not only are they professionals, they are international corporations. We're not just talking about a little criminal gang here. They are business. In fact, I think it's about 11% of the global economy is crime, basically. The global GDP is crime. So these are huge businesses with massively deep pockets, probably in some cases bigger than the banks. And this is what they do 24/7. They are clever at it. And of course, technology allows you to send out millions, literally millions of emails that look good.
Yeah, you need one or two to take the bait.
It's all you need.
So definitely report it.
Yes, do. Yes.
You've got an increasingly good chance now, as the mandatory code looms, the
Yes.
voluntary code gives way, you've got an increasingly good chance of getting your money back now.
Yes, you
And
do.
if the bank says no, go to the Ombudsman, right?
Ombudsman, exactly. And do check your credit record as well and just keep going back to it because, you know, once something like that happens.
As Tony Neat, CEO of Get Safe Online, just said. Well, you mentioned crime, Jasmine, and we can now bring into the discussion criminal lawyer Nick Freeman, another On the Money regular. Nick, good to see you as ever. What do you think of the fact that it's taken so long to move from a voluntary code, which only came in on APP fraud in 2019, and within 2 years, the government's admitted it's not working?
Yeah, well, the consultation period is still ongoing. It carries on till January. It's too long, too much money's gone. The banks need to assume responsibility. So my answer is it should have happened much sooner, but at least it's going to happen. And as you say, so many people are embarrassed to complain. They feel ashamed of what they've done. And these scams are so sophisticated. It's very hard to find someone who hasn't actually been successfully scammed. Most people have, if you ask them, have been scammed, victims of scams. And at least now, and of course, it's important to bear in mind, the police aren't interested anymore. So from a police perspective, these terrible offences, which are very destructive for human life, are not really investigated by the police. The police say, look, speak to the bank, it's not our problem, we haven't got the resources. So as far as Joe Public is concerned, well, it's not even a matter for the police anymore. It's almost decriminalising what is a very serious offence. So it's not before time. The banks are now going to be transparent. They're going to be shamed, I think, into revealing how prevalent this fraud is and how little support they're given. Hopefully, we haven't seen the legislation yet. We know what it's intended to demonstrate. But I don't think in every case it's going to be mandatory for the banks to reimburse. I think they're going to be much more obliged to reimburse. But I think a provision that is going to compel them in every case to reimburse probably won't hit the statute book. It'd be very interesting to see. Because there are circumstances, of course, where some people are negligent and they bring this problem about their own negligence. And it's right that the bank shouldn't be responsible for that.
Yeah. Tony, you're CEO of Get Safe Online, as we've said, but you were previously one of our boys in blue, and we thank you for your service. But Nick's got a point, hasn't he? It is very difficult for the police to investigate online fraud. It's very, very sophisticated. And I think he is onto something when he says a lot of the public think the police aren't interested in this area.
I absolutely agree with Nick. I was a policeman a long time ago, and I've been slightly embarrassed with some of the results that I've seen coming through the feedback that I get from serving police officers. And I remember I was still in the job when legislations changed, where reporting went from reporting to the police. And it was mandated that you reported to the banks. And what can the banks do in relation to actually arresting people? I think it's a great shame. It reduces the amount of crime being reported because it's not part of the crime statistics. And I think this is dreadful. I think it's such a shame that the one or two banks, maybe a few more, that have been successful and been very good at it, have been dragged down by those appalling banks that haven't been looking after their customers, haven't signed up to the basics of codes. And it is disgraceful. And I agree with everything Nick says. Sometimes, and it's hard for me to say, I'm not proud of being an ex-police officer, but I don't think it's the police officers on the street. I think it's the government that are doing this type of problem with them and the senior officers who are complying.
Joel, I mentioned two newspapers there who deserve congratulations for getting us to this point with the mandatory code coming in. I should add Age UK, your own organisation, also Age Concern, which many, many fabulous organisations like your own. I know you'll be looking at the legislation very closely, monitoring it as it goes through the Commons, looking for amendments that are watering down the spirit of it. What do you want to see in that legislation to make it really bulletproof?
Really what it does is give the PSR, the watchdog, the city regulator, the power to actually set their own regulation. And so it might be a bit of a longer process, but maybe the first step is really just giving the regulator, the watchdog, the right tools and the right teeth to actually enforce and supervise this new regulation. We hope we can get it out in the Queen's speech next year. We hope, we want to get it out in this Parliament as soon as possible. And then really, The PSR have already consulted before, Age UK and lots of other organisations respond to that consultation. This is the next phase of what they're doing, going out to industry, going out to consumer representatives, asking them what we should do. But, we need to make sure that gets right. Once that legislation is enacted and the regulation is enforced, then it's still going to mean proper supervision and enforcement to make sure that the banks are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And one way of doing that is having that transparency, like you say, so that consumers can see this bank is treating people fairly, this bank is refunding people. If I'm a victim of a crime, I'm going to get my money back in a more straightforward way.
My reading of the runes so far, just talking, I've made a couple of phone calls this morning, reading about this new law coming in. I don't think it's going to be mandatory for banks to publish how many fraud victims they've had and how many fraud victims they've compensated.
Okay.
I think that will only happen, that transparency that Joel Lewis mentioned there, as a punishment. Surely, already that's wrong. It should be transparent from the get-go.
Yes, it should be. Yes, absolutely.
So it's a competition between banks to do good rather than not a competition among them to do bad.
Absolutely, yes. But what I'm also thinking, though, is that to speak for the banks for a moment, there is an element here of us as well as the consumer. We do need to take responsibility. Yeah. But I think the banks, what they also need to do is to have much more connection with other banks around the world, because this is an international problem. They are doing it already, but I think we need to see much more so that they can not be constantly on the back foot behind these scammers who, as I say, have very deep pockets. They're doing it all the time. It's a professional job for them.
Nick Freeman, last word to you as our resident lawyer on this panel, if I may. What do you want to see in this legislation to make it bulletproof so the banks can't fail to implement exactly the spirit of what we're trying to do here?
Well, I'd like to see the transparency that you just alluded to become law. That should become law so that the public can look at every bank and see actually who's got the intelligence, who's taking the right precautions, who's actually looking after their customer. That's one thing that I'd like to see. I'd also like assurances that when this comes in, the costs aren't actually going to be passed on to the customer, because, of course, there is going to be a massive cost implication. Who is going to bear that? And I suspect, unfortunately, it's going to be the bank customer, isn't it? So they need to be safeguarded against that. And I'd like to see legislation that really compels the bank in the vast majority of cases to reimburse, not to hang people out to dry and make them go to the financial ombudsman, because that's a lengthy process and it does destroy lives. And it's very unfair for that to happen.
Well, you know what? We've had quite a few discussions here on the money since early September when we began, but I'm particularly proud of that one. A really important set of comments from all of you. Thank you all for your time here On the Money. We will be keeping an eye on that legislation too. Policymaker at Age UK, Joel Lewis there, ex-policeman and CEO of Get Safe Online, Tony Neate, our criminal lawyer, Nick Freeman, and of course, Jasmine Birtles, who's going to stay with us for the next hour. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Startup Britain interview is with a businesswoman and 2018's Apprentice winner, Sian Gabidon. But before that, here's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed the bomb, which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday, had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. An investigation is underway after 2 women and 2 children died following a house fire in Bexley Heath in southeast London. The victims were rescued from the first floor but all died at the scene. The fire is not thought to be suspicious. The UK is banning Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move brings British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says Hamas has significant terrorist capability. A Hamas official has described the decision as biased towards Israel. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means people can visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a national lockdown from Monday for at least 10 days. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try and contain a fourth wave of COVID cases. And the Duchess of Cornwall has been making some new friends as she and Prince Charles continue their tour of Egypt. Camilla visited the Brook Veterinary Hospital in Cairo, a charity for horses and donkeys, and that's enough horsing around for one day. I'll have more on all of today's main stories at the top of the hour. We'll see you then.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. Lots and lots of you in touch with us via email and Twitter about APP scams. Elizabeth says this has got worse because we're all forced online. Even if you have an issue, you can't speak to anyone unless you wait for hours on the phone. All the banks are closing. Online is the bane of our modern life and a win-win for fraudsters. That's a fabulous comment. Neil says, I was scammed when an alleged loan company required me to put the first 2 months' payment into my loan account. They then said the payment didn't go through. When I contacted my bank, they refused to help me as I willingly transferred the money. And Mike says, I've noted increasing attempts by my banks to still push responsibility onto the customer by asking for tick boxes on fraud, limiting transfer values to £10,000 and still requiring a confirmation text code, even to accounts that I've paid multiple times before. Thanks for all your emails. We appreciate you getting in touch with us. We are going to watch this legislation like a hawk here on The Money and continue to debate and discuss it. Now, turkey dinners. An essential part of any Christmas day, of course. But turkey farmers around the country are under pressure to process their poultry before Christmas due to a shortage in staff. Weeks Turkey Farm in Essex have had to advertise for farmyard labour for the first time in their 100-year history. They now fear that Brexit and a lack of seasonal workers will be the demise of small farms such as theirs. And they say every turkey farmer in the country will be having the same fears about the labour situation. Well, our South East reporter, Ellie Costello, has been finding out more.
Black feathers, red faces and beady little eyes. The Christmas turkey is at the centre of many tables on Christmas Day across the UK. But here at Weeks Turkey Farm in Essex, getting these turkeys to the table is proving more challenging this year.
There are 2,000
turkeys, as you can hear, in this field right now, and they're going to be here till the end of the month before they are taken inside and prepared for Christmas. Now, lots of people in the last few weeks and months have been asking what's going to happen to our Christmas turkey on the Christmas dinner table because of the shortage of workers. Well, I'm here to find out.
William and Richard Weeks are brothers. Their family have been farming turkeys on this site for almost 100 years.
Well, I've noticed we've had an awful lot of orders come in early, surprisingly, but I suppose people are panicking that there will be no turkeys, but we've got the same amount of turkeys. It's the staff shortage that the farmers are, finding a problem.
Now they're facing new challenges with staff shortages in the run-up to Christmas.
It is generally finding people that want to do the job. Nobody seems to want to do physical work nowadays, and it is a certain type of person that will pluck turkeys. It is not everybody's idea of sort of what they want to do, but and there isn't the casual labour about that there used to be about on farms. Unfortunately, for casual labour, it's normally the older people that have got the time to do it, whereas young people have obviously got their own jobs, and and they're not going to come for 2 or 3 weeks of the year to do the job.
With free movement prior to Brexit, William and Richard never had to worry about farmyard labour. Now, for the first time ever, they've had to advertise for seasonal staff.
We've had an advert running in Writtle Agricultural College, University College, and that's been since the beginning of September, and we've not had one email, phone call. It's a good job opportunity for someone, and we want to keep the farming going. If we could have 15 staff, that would do us for the 3 weeks.
We're not alone in this, and there's not a turkey farmer I don't think there's a turkey farmer in the country doing the seasonal Christmas turkey that is not worried about the situation.
It could be, the demise of small farmers like us, if we can't get, the staff, because at the end of the day, units can be let out, which is easier, but first and foremost, we want to continue farming, and we just need help and, farm managers and young people coming through.
A government spokesperson told us the UK has a highly resilient food supply chain, and we continue to work closely with industry to ensure producers have access to the labour that they need. The government is allowing up to 5,500 poultry workers to enter the UK to support the supply chain in the run-up to Christmas. We also want employers to make long-term investments in the UK domestic workforce. Our plan for jobs is helping people across the country retrain, build new skills and get back into work. So what's William and Richard's message to those of us concerned about getting a turkey on the table this Christmas?
This year we're going to start earlier than we ever have done, by 5 days, just in case there is, no staff again, and, it'll all be all hands on deck,
We will definitely get through, but it's going to be it could be a lot harder than we'd like, and we don't know. We might get a few more pluckers turn up, but we won't know until the day. It's going to happen, but it's just could be difficult.
Ellie Costello, GB News.
Our own Ellie Costello there with her feathered friends. Now, the pandemic and related lockdown plunged the UK, of course, into a deep economic slump. But new data from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs shows that hope springs eternal. You can't crush the entrepreneurial spirit, not here in the UK. In March 2021, more new businesses were created than in any month since records began in the late 1980s. And to celebrate this, our On the Monthly regular feature, Startup Britain, showcases some of the best startups in Britain right now to ask the founders how they did it. Now, today my guest is an unusual entrepreneur. She won The Apprentice, aged 26. It's Sian Gabidon, daughter to a nurse and factory worker. Sian, who was born in Leeds, spent her formative years moving around council estates where she developed her passion for fashion. See what I did there? After receiving a sewing machine at the age of 16. Since winning the popular reality TV show, Sian launched her own swimwear and fashion brand called Sian Marie, with the continuing involvement of British business magnate Lord Alan Sugar. The brand is sold via ASOS and most recently in selective Asda's across the UK. And having started her career working in this very store, this is a collaboration close to Sian's heart. And here she is in the studio. Ta-da!
Hello.
Sian Gabidon. Firstly, congratulations for winning The Apprentice.
Thank you very much.
I don't always watch The Apprentice, but I did watch
that's a good start.
that tussle between you and the young woman who with the milk nut brand or something.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you deserve to win.
Thank you.
You obviously there's something about you business-wise. You're an entrepreneurial person.
Yeah.
Did it take a lot of guts to go on The Apprentice? Does it take a lot of guts to start your own business?
I think both things, 100%. You know, The Apprentice itself, I loved the show before I went on it, and I used to watch it every year. And I used to, you know, when it gets to the final, I used to be like, oh, I bet that's so scary, doing that in front of Lord Sugar. So to be on that, to get on it,
you're fired. Except you weren't.
Exactly. I never was. So you know, I did all right, but it was very scary. And then setting up a business, it's the same. You know, it's a very scary kind of journey. But you know, for me, luckily, I've put in the time, put in the effort, I've given it my all, and I'm doing very well.
Now, you launched your business, it was originally focused on swimwear.
Yes.
Then the pandemic came along and we all stopped going on holiday.
Exactly.
The business must have had a sort of near-death experience.
Do you know what? It's been a tough time for everybody and for every business, and, you know, it's been a nightmare, especially for us. And when I first heard of COVID, I was like, well, we'll see what happens. It's probably not
So were we all.
Exactly.
So were we all.
Then, as soon as I started to realise, actually, we're a UK-based swim brand, you know, we have a little bit of an international reach, but it was mainly UK, I was thinking, this is going to actually cause major issues. Luckily, I'm very involved in the business and involved in every part of it, so we managed to kind of pivot and, you know, adapt, move into new areas a lot quicker than you normally would as a brand.
Small businesses can be agile, can't they? They can move quickly.
That's one of the key things, I think. One thing that I like to be is very involved, and COVID was a perfect time, a perfect example of why that was great for me, because I was able to do what I needed to do.
So you pivoted the business away from swimwear. You still do swimwear, but you moved into this kind of new area. It's become known as loungewear. It's basically sitting around watching the telly while you eat mashed potato and eat crisps, right?
Whatever you want to eat, yeah. Or, you know, nowadays everybody's on Zoom, everybody's working from home, so it's kind of like your chill outfits that you wear when you're not having to wear your suits. We always planned to move into it, just not as quickly as we did. So the COVID kind of pushed us to do it a lot quicker than we planned to. But luckily, it was kind of, you know, it was the best thing I'd say we've done as a business. And, you know, now to be stocked in some of the retailers we're in with the loungewear, it's been an amazing end to a crazy couple of years, I guess.
Now, you're a Leeds girl, as we said.
I am.
Proudly Yorkshire.
Yes.
The right side of the Pennines, according to you. Certain people I know would have a different view, but anyway. How difficult has it been, even with the huge boost that being the winner of Apprentice gives you? There are still big hurdles to overcome. You're from a relatively humble background. Yes. You had to raise finance. Of course, Lord Sugar put in £250,000 or something at the beginning. How difficult has it been to overcome barriers, particularly as a woman from a background where there are maybe not too many entrepreneurs in your family?
Do you know what? People sometimes forget that I set the business up pre The Apprentice. I'd been running it for a few years, and I was doing that very much organically, small scale. There was no investment, and I was working full time. And, you know, it was a very difficult time because I didn't have wads of cash to be doing much with it. We were just reinvesting the profits. So for me, it was always just about being savvy. As a female, I'm very confident in myself, in what I can do. You know, you do hit hurdles, and sometimes you'll have struggles, you know, just being a woman or being a black female especially. And for me, I've always just believed in myself and known that I can do what I need to do. And, you know, I've managed to, every hurdle, find a solution and find an answer.
I mean, business, it's basically just solving one problem after another, isn't it? You never know what's going to happen each day.
Yeah.
You have to just keep your attitude right, don't you? You have to be positive, positive, positive.
Exactly.
Must get you down sometimes, though. You must end up
tough.
laying awake at night worrying about this, that and the other.
I think in the early days especially, that was one of the biggest problems is, you know, especially when you're doing a lot of it yourself, you're just constantly stressed. You know, it's not as fun as it seems on social media. But for me, I always look at the end goal, where I want to be, what I want to do, and that pushes me to continue. I think the key thing I have learnt more recently is that you do have to have time off. You have to think about your mental health, because if you don't, it'll just ruin you. It doesn't matter how far you get with it as a person.
And don't forget your personal life, of course. Families can really suffer when small businesses are happening, right? Because the people running a small business, they just get so absorbed. It's like their baby, literally.
It is, even now.
And they get obsessed.
It's, you know, it's my baby, but I have to make time for other people. I have to make time for myself, you know, and not be too absorbed in it, because you do have to, you know, have a bit of time off sometimes.
Now, you're an online brand, but you're moving into big stores now. You've just been signed up by Asda.
Yes.
Congratulations, that's a huge achievement.
Thank you.
What sort of scale is your business at now, Sean?
It's at a growing scale.
And where do you actually make the stuff?
The stuff is made overseas, so we produce internationally, which originally it was quite funny because it was all produced by me on a sewing machine right in the very, very early days. Obviously, getting the investment, working with retailers, the whole production line, the way that we work, you know, the way we produce completely changes. But one thing that's great about our ranges, especially the lounge, the fact that we pride ourselves on fabrics, finishes, qualities. So it's very, you know, expensive fabrics. There's no kind of cutting corners with it. And as part of that, it's almost a sustainable element. We're saying you can buy this once, wear it forever. You know, it's not going to be a throwaway fashion product. We're not fast fashion. We're actually trying to be quite the opposite of that and saying it might cost you £35 for a hoodie, but you're going to keep that forever. It's worth the investment in a way.
What's your biggest bugbear as a businesswoman? What's the thing you most want to change in terms of maybe something the government can do, a policy change, taxation? What really gets your goat in business? And you think, that's just mad, we need to do this differently?
The biggest, I don't know, because there's a lot, isn't there? You know, there's a lot of things like, as a business, so as an adult, you know, there's things that sometimes I've grown up and learned about, and I've thought, why do we have to do that? You know, business rates, certain things that you pay, you kind of think, why do we?
That's a frequent topic on this show, business rates.
You know, I understand
you pay them whether you make a profit or not. You pay them if you make no revenue. You still got to pay your business rates.
It's a very difficult one. I think as small businesses especially, you know, I think there should be more help, because at the end of the day, they're opening up jobs. There's a lot of benefits to small businesses. There's a lot of reasons why they're doing it. And they've not got wads and wads of cash. You know, everybody, it's a struggle for everybody at the start. So for me, I just think the government need to understand that. COVID was a prime example of where we all needed support. And, you know, you kind of want to make sure that you're getting that support and getting the help from them.
What's your vision for this business? Obviously, you've got your own sort of personal franchise. You're a very well-known person. But in the end, you've always struck me as somebody who wants more than that. You don't just want to be famous. You actually want to run a business and be taken seriously as a businesswoman, as opposed to a celebrity.
Yeah, as opposed to just a winner of The Apprentice as well. I think the brand, you know, our ethos, our vision, who we are, is something that we continue to grow and develop and push. So for me, it's more about just getting that message out, getting the products in the right places for the people to see. And I think being in George is fantastic, because people can feel the quality. You know, you can, as soon as you go in a store and you see it, you know it's good quality and it's going to last. And I think that's what we really want to push. And
strikes me, getting into a huge supermarket like that you know, that range, a premium range within a kind of discount store, that seems to be a good space for you. That must have been quite tough. How did you bring that about, Sean? How determined did you have to be?
I think it was more of a collaboration, in a sense of it working for both of us, you know, and I think it's a great opportunity for you know, the way that Asda and George are moving. They've got other brands in there now. I think it's great post-pandemic that people can go in there and buy the clothes as well as do the shop. You know, it's making it a lot easier for the customer. And then for us, you know, as a brand, obviously it's a great opportunity, but it's also just, again, I just like the idea of people being able to buy a product that is actually genuinely good quality, it's going to last. And although we could say it's premium, the price is not ridiculous. You know, you might hold that next to another product and think it's actually worth that £5 more. So I think for us, I'm really excited to have the product in people's faces so they can feel it and see it.
And what we always ask people who come on Startup Britain, even winners of The Apprentice, what's your one bit of advice to viewers who are watching who think, you know what, I could start a business?
My advice, it's a funny piece of advice because you could take it quite negatively, but what I always say to people, because everybody wants to set up a business, especially because of social media now, everybody wants to have a brand. I say, before you do anything, before you write a business plan, before you even decide, what you want to do, think about that what it is, if it's fashion, whatever, and imagine yourself doing that every single day and hitting hurdles. And are you sure that you will feel passionately, that you're excited about it, that you will do that for a long time? Because I do, I hit hurdles, but I love my job every single day. I love what I do. And I think it's more a case of before you do anything, just make sure you're ready for that, because it's not going to be easy and there's going to be challenges.
Well, good luck with the business. There she is, Sian Gabidon, winner of The Apprentice, Leeds lass, entrepreneur extraordinaire. You've been watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Stay right there. We're not going away because you've got another hour of economics, business and consumer news, you lucky people. We'll be discussing why Amazon's decided to stop issuing Visa credit cards in the UK. And we'll be showing my Money Talks interview with Professor Lord Robert Skidelsky. Stay with us. You're on the money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. Colder weather is on the way, but today at least stays very mild. Cloudy for most, and it stays wet in northern Scotland. The exception being Shetland, away from this weather front, but subject to some very strong winds at first today, those winds easing later, and then this weather front bringing that damp weather to northern Scotland. But elsewhere, closer to high pressure, we've still got this mild but rather cloudy westerly airflow. So a lot of cloud around, but the promise of some breaks in the clouds, some sunshine coming through eastern England into northern England later, Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland. And it's a mild day, especially where we get those cloud breaks, temperatures at 13, 14, perhaps even 15 or 16 Celsius there in Aberdeen. Not feeling quite so pleasant where we've got the rain in northern Scotland and staying blustery in Shetland. The rain continues through the evening and overnight in the far north, but further south we keep the cloud cover. Again, some cloud covering the hills and some spots of rain and drizzle around some western hills and coasts. But on the whole, a dry and relatively mild night, not quite as mild as the last few nights. And that wet weather still with us in the far north of Scotland as we begin Saturday. And it comes south, so a spell of rain for Scotland, Northern Ireland during the morning, before it then pushes into northern England, and it does clear during the afternoon from Scotland and Northern Ireland with sunny spells and blustery showers replacing it. It stays cloudy, roasty dry, but with a few spots of rain here and there in the south, and 12 to 13 Celsius, a degree or so down compared to today. Here's that area of rain then, coming south on Saturday night. It fizzles out somewhat, so not much rain on it, but it does mark a significant change once we clear that cloud. Brighter skies arrive from the north, sunny spells on Sunday for many places, but some showers around coastal areas. It will also be colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome back to On the Money, your ongoing daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan. For the next hour, we'll be talking about why Amazon has decided to ban Visa credit cards in the UK. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 2 o'clock. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. Detectives are examining the possibility that the motion of the taxi stopping suddenly may have caused the improvised device to detonate prematurely. Police have also spoken to the brother of the bomber, Emad al-Swaylamin. An investigation is underway following the deaths of 2 women and 2 children after a house fire in southeast London. Firefighters managed to pull all 4 people from the property in Bexley Heath, but they died at the scene. A man who got out before firefighters arrived was taken to hospital. The fire is not thought to be suspicious. A 13-year-old boy